Welcome to the Two Boots Word Vault podcast. This episode is a recording of a presentation Walton Stanley and I gave to the Fifth Direction Elder Circle in February 2025. The presentation was on the need to access communal soul. It is also similar to my presentation at the 2025 Minnesota Men's Winter Conference, Men Who Stand 20 Hearts High.
Just wanted to talk briefly as a preface to your presentation. So Tim's going to do a presentation on community and the communal mode of being that he did at the conference. So you'll get a sample of that. And kind of leading into that, I've been thinking about community, and one way to frame it is to look at its opposite, which would be solipsism. I read an article in The Guardian talking about, Donald Trump as a solipsist, and, probably Elon Musk fits that as well, which really means that to a solipsist, it's different than narcissism. To a solipsist, only I really exist or matter, or only my thoughts and mind really exist and matter. Other beings are of no consequence whatsoever and have no importance. To me, it's the image of that would be kind of like if you were playing a video game and there are fictional characters as part of the video game that you interact with, and maybe you use some and ally with some, when it suits your purposes, and then you can just kill any of them at will without any feeling or concern for them, because they don't really exist. They're just fictions. They're phantasms, right? I think that's how a solipsist kind of looks at the world. I think the West and kind of that Cartesian philosophy and Cartesian dualism, cognito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. Well, then the corollary of that is I can never know if anyone else is thinking, therefore they are not. And we see that in, the Cartesian idea that animals don't really feel pain, and it doesn't really matter what you do to them because they're non-entities, right? Looking at that, I also decided to look at, Hillman has an introduction in Rag and Bone Chop of the Heart to the section on loving the community and work, which is a section of poetry. And I was going to read a small passage from there. So this is Hillman writing and talking about Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler called fellow feeling Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which has been translated into social feeling and community feeling. Adler, who originated psychoanalysis along with Freud and Jung, considered Gemeinschaftsgefühl the feeling of intimate belonging to the full spectrum of humanity. And I would add, after encountering indigenous teachers, Gemeinschaftsgefühl could be applied to the more than human world as well. Yeah. So Adler, who originated psychoanalysis along with Freud and Jung, considered Gemeinschaftsgefühl, the feeling of intimate belonging to the full spectrum of humanity, to be the dominant motive of life, as basic as Freud's sexual drive and Jung's urge toward meaning. For him, a man of genius is primarily a man of supreme usefulness. I think a lot of the work we do in men's work has to do with that community feeling, that Gemeinschaftsgefühl. Building a community, building small communities of men, and building, as Fifth Direction has done, a larger community of men extended virtually, but also live and in person. And I thought I would give you one poem from that section, and this is by Robert Francis. This is called Waxwings, as in like cedar waxwings, a bird. 4 Tao philosophers as cedar waxwings chat on a February berry bush. In sun, and I am one. Such merriment and such sobriety, the small wild fruit on the tall stalk. Was this not always my true style? Above an elegance of snow, beneath a silk blue sky, a brotherhood of 4 birds. Can you mistake us? To sun to feast and to converse, and all together. For this I have abandoned all my other lives.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll turn us four cedar waxwings Tao philosophers over to Tim.
Thanks, Walton. You know, that Cartesian, when he said, I think, therefore I am, that reminded me, over the weekend, I asked Miguel, how do the Native Americans and our indigenous brothers, what do they think of us that came out of the European culture? He says, well, they call you the backwards people. And I was thinking, going back to Descartes, let's flip that around. I am, therefore I think. We're studying life all over the world, and we're finding that just because we think in a certain way doesn't mean other beings don't think. They could be saying in tree language, I am, therefore I think. I've been paying a lot of attention to that. We are the backwards people. And I think what we've been doing in our work for the last 40 years is working to shift our perspective. And Walton, I'm glad you could pronounce that German word by Adler, because I used that quote in my presentation too. I just didn't try to say that German word, otherwise it would have stuck out more.
I was just going to say 3 years of high school German classes are at last good for something.
Well, I had 2 years of Latin class, and then when I went to the university, they told me I was pronouncing the Latin wrong. Yeah, so, instead of Veni Vidi Vici, it was Veni Vidi Vici, according to the university. So it was just another path. And as with all language, it's understanding what's being said and trying to understand the labels and the language. And that's what poetry does for me. It's between the words, between the images that the eternal comes through. And so I want to start with that, read some of what I prepared the other day, and then we'll have a conversation also. In the MMC conferences, we've worked to find ways for diverse men to experience communal soul. We've found some success through story, poetry, intellectual stimulation, physical attentiveness, and ceremony. When someone looks for communal soul, there are multiple doors through which wisdom, reverence, awareness, and energetic drive may emerge. If we work to open one of those doors and pass through, we may find an opening to the eternal, which is not the same as the everlasting. The eternal is timeless. We have found that the eternal component moves through the best stories, the best poetry, and the best rituals. Yet it takes our communal effort and time to experience awareness of that timeless component. And I use the word eternal in order to not get trapped by religious biases and labels. In a world that does not understand or seem to value communal soul, grief grows because there is little communal practice for expressing grief. We may have conversations over oceans as we're doing now, yet we may never learn the name of the neighbor across the street. We will run away from the contradictions that exist within communal soul, and we safely retreat to our specialized communities. We lose touch with our sensory abilities to cope with the innumerable living entities and ever-present obstacles around us. Our generations are the most affluent the world has known. They are also the least communal, despite our digital web of interconnection, despite the numerous entities we interact with. The divisions between our specialized communities are wider and firmer than ever before. Affluence, instant gratification, and self-actualization, rather than communal actualization, are the inherited expectations of our people. We return to our homes, our privileges, and the isolation of personal individualism. When affluence, consumer comfort, and individual security are the stated aims for our wider culture, angst, stress, and loneliness are bound to expand. In 2023, the Surgeon General of the United States released an 82-page report, Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. In that report, 50% of the surveyed respondents said they experienced loneliness. More and more time is spent with screens, machines, and technologically enhanced experiences. This does not bode well for the younger folks coming behind us. They will have fewer models or opportunities for communal experiences. The physical senses are left out of their communal experience. But the physical senses as a whole are the gateways to communal soul. And the inner senses are the pathways through the inner realms toward the eternal realm. There is an inherent craving for communal soul. When stadiums fill with tens of thousands of sport fans, those fans are craving communal experience. However, communal excitement is not communal soul. I'm an individual and a herd animal, and I believe I can be a spokesman for communal soul. I am the oldest of 11 children with 37 nieces and nephews. I have a son and 3 stepchildren. Include all of the spouses and our grandchildren and grandnieces and grandnephews. There are over 200 of us directly connected to my dead parents. I also have 41 first cousins. I am a herd animal. I'm also a part of various communities with specialized interests. As with the desire for individual survival, the urge to merge is inherent in all living beings. At the core of communal soul is the physical and emotional experience with an infusion of energy from beyond the present. In my family, and by the way, I had dinner with some of my siblings and their spouses last night. In my family, the continuing presence of babies, and 2 more were born in January, and youngsters, and the invocation and the memories of our ancestors unite us as we bathe in the waters of past, present, and future. And that is our communal soul, our shared biology, our shared history, and our shared desire for connection creates moments of communal soul. Self-actualization, or self-awareness connected to the earth and the cosmos, should be encouraged for our younger people. If we men have familiar experience with communal soul, initiatory rituals are the communal tools for development for our youngsters. As we age, relationships and communal soul should become our goal. and ritual thinking must create the tools for communal soul. However, the culture as we know it does not support the work that's needed to create and continue communal soul. In our 2024 election process, Tim Walz was running for vice president, and he said in an interview, self-actualization takes a lot of money and time, and it's not available to working folks. Self-actualization or mature self-awareness is not conscious work of the current cultural community. Most of the young folks, especially the working class males, are not allowed the time to pursue self-actualization, nor are they guided toward an awareness of their connection to life's currency. We, as older men, need to work for communal actualization. We must role model life as individual souls within communal soul. And we must offer assistance to the ones following behind us. I've lived my adult life with a love of the best poetry. When I see that our contemporary culture is one of loneliness, I've gone to poems and prose by serious poets, the way theologians go to their sacred texts and commentaries. Serious poets may work in a very solitary manner, but the best of them work for and participate in communal soul. They study and write about the inner and outer workings of the soul, attentively observing the world around them and the soul of the culture in which they exist. One of Robert Bly's greatest gifts was as a community maker. So I want to use some of the words by poets who've written about communal soul, and I want to start with Robert Bly. In 1974, in the American Poetry Review, he wrote this about community, quote, "A true community has old people in it and feeble-minded people. There are babies and people with entirely different ways of grasping the world than yours, entirely on the physical plane. And they have duties instead of freedoms. And what binds them together are similar restraints. A community is experienced as water in which you swim." Unquote. So a community is bound by communal soul, whether consciously or not. Bly worked for communal soul, and because he understood its value. Here's a poem by Bly that touches on one source of loneliness and a young man's desire for communal soul. 50 men sitting together. Part 1. After a long walk in the woods, clear-cut for lumber, lit by only a few young pines, I turn home, drawn to water. A band of shadow softens half the lake, draws the shadow down from the westward hills. I see in that massive, masculine shadow 50 men sitting together in a hall or a crowded room, lifting something indistinct up into the resonating night. Number 2. Near shore, reeds stand about in groups, unevenly, as if they might finally ascend to the sky altogether. Each reed has its own thin thread of darkness inside, so it is relaxed, and rooted in the mud. So the son who has lived protected by the mother lives protected by the reeds in the joy of the half-darkness. That was Robert. He always claimed that he was his mother's son, and his brother was his father's son. Part 3. The woman stays in the kitchen and does not want to waste fuel by lighting a lamp as she waits for the drunk husband to come home. Then she serves him food in silence. What does the son do? He cleaves to her, looks down, goes outdoors to feed with wild things, lives in the reeds, pulls away from men, reaches upward, looks to the sky, ascends. Number 4. How far he is from working men when he is 40, from all men. The men singing chant far out on the water, grounded in downward shadow. He cannot go there because he still hopes he will not die. He will not throw himself into the shadow. The dark comes down slowly, the way snow falls, or herds pass a cave mouth. I look up at the other shore. It is night. And here's a part of a poem by D.H. Lawrence. This is the last part of his poem, When I Went to the Circus, written back in the 1920s, and it is appropriate today. When modern people see the carnal body, dauntless and flickering gay, playing among the elements neatly, beyond competition, and displaying no personality, modern people are depressed. Modern people feel themselves at a disadvantage. They know they have no bodies that could play among the elements. They have only their personalities that are best seen flat on the film. Flat personalities in 2 dimensions, imponderable and touchless. And they grudged the circus people the swooping gay weight of limbs that flower in the mere movements. And they grudge them in the immediate physical understanding they have with the circus beasts. And they grudge them their circus life altogether. Yet the strange, almost frightened shout of delight that comes now and then from children show that children vaguely know how cheated they are of their birthright in the bright, wild circus flesh. One of the other things that Hillman wrote in that essay that Walton quoted, he said, poems, beyond their human meanings, beyond their human feelings, enliven Nanola, what the Trobrianders call moral intelligence. So I'd like to go to the poets to tap into their Nanola, which I believe is a deep aspect of communal soul and includes connection to the eternal realm and the realms of past and present, our ancestors and our future. Poet Robinson Jeffers, in his introduction to the selected poems, he wrote, and I quote, "It seemed to me that by reading poetry and trying to write it, poetry is bound to concern itself chiefly with permanent things and the permanent aspects of life. Poetry must deal with things that a reader 2,000 years away, whether past or present, could understand and be moved by. Unquote. In December, a jazz poet friend of mine, Ted King, passed this on to me from a Substack by a man who writes as the Poetic Outlaws. His name is Eric Rittenberry, and he wrote, "Personal identity is exalted like a sacred idol, and the sanctuaries of creative thought have been battered by suffocating ideologies. The essence of all true poetry lies in its ability to transcend the mask of self, to rise above the facade of personality and speak from the eternal soul within. It bridges the Creator's solitude and humanity's infinite spirit, carrying the secret flame of one heart into the boundless unity of all." Unquote. I'd like to add that I think it's very important that young people, and I'm thinking now, for instance, my grandsons who are 14 and 16, that they get to know who they are. There's so much confusion today among the young about their personal identity. And that's what the initiatory processes are about, especially for the young ones, that they get to know who they are in this enormous thing, that this planet, this mother of ours, that is alive all around them, so that they can know themselves. And then, as they become older, they come back to the center of the community and work for communal actualization. But of course, we live in a Western culture that lifts up the supreme individual. And I think that's where so many identity poets get trapped. It was a good thing for them when they're young. And I'm thinking of Nikki Giovanni's poem, it's an I am poem. And that is a great poem for a young person. I am the queen of the Nile. I am this, I am that. My breasts do this, my breasts do that. It taps into the archetypal being that a young person has to enter and know that they're entering, but at some point they have to move beyond that. In communal soul, as in the best poetry, there is an opening to the eternal, which comes through the gaps between rationalism, emotion, and the physical senses. And that eternal essence envelops us and absorbs those conditions. Bly regularly visited with Dr. Javad Nurbash, who's a Sufi teacher in England. In Dr. Nurbash's book, one of his books, he wrote, "The Sufi says that witnessing the ocean with the eye of a drop is impossible. However, when the drop becomes one with the ocean, it sees with the eye of the ocean." Sufi teachers are not the only ones who dive into that pattern of awareness. Mystics, saints, wise indigenous teachers also do so. And we find such descriptive instructions throughout poetry, such as The Conference of Birds by Attar. We find it in Native American tales and in the ancient oral traditions of Europe. And more recently, this understanding comes in a short poem by Olav Hagi, the Norwegian poet who died in 1994. And he was introduced to North America by Bly's translations. Here's the poem Rivers meet. Rivers meet, each from its own mountain. Grasping each other by the hand, they blend their song, their blood. They carry on, of one mind and stronger, far less likely to stumble on the stones. No one shall wade dry shod now. And the poet and Native American activist John Trudell, this is one of his spoken word pieces. Listening. I was listening to the voices of life chanting in unison. Carry on the struggle. The generations surge together in resistance to meet the reality of power. Mother Earth embraces her children in natural beauty to last beyond oppressors' brutality as the butterfly floats into life, which is forever. The power of understanding real connections to spirit is the meaning of our resistance. Our struggle is not sacrifice lost. It is natural energy properly used. I went back and I found this other quote. Why groups of men? What can good groups do? And this is also one of the things that we're experiencing right here. This is from Ansari the Sufi, who was living from 1006 to 1089. And he wrote, there are 4 traps which groups can help you with. Ingratitude in good fortune. Impatience in ill fortune. Discontent with your lot. Hesitation serving your fellows. I've had that experience with my small group of men, also with the larger groups. So I want to quote Gary Snyder. This is a fun poem about creating communal soul. It's called The Summer of 97. He was adding on an addition to his house up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Earth Spirit, please don't mind if cement trucks grind and plant spirits wait a while. Please come back and smile. Ditches, lines, and drains, forms and pores and hidden doors, the house begins. Sun for power, cedar for siding, fresh skin poles for framing, gravel for crunching, and Bollingen for bucks. Daniel peeling, moth for singing, Matt for pounding, Bruce for pondering, Chuck for plumbering, David drywalling, staining, brawling, Stu for drain rock, Kurt for hot wire, Gary for cold beer, Carol for brave laugh till she leaves, crew grieves, Jen for painting each window frame, Jen read again, garden cucumbers for lunch, fresh tomatoes crunch, Tor for indoor paints and grins, Ted for roof tiles, tar paper curls, sawdust swirls, trucks for hauling, barrels for burning, old bedrooms disappearing, wild turkeys watching, deer disdainful, bullfrogs croaking, David Parmenter for bringing flooring at night, Though his mill burned down, he's still coming round. Sindra tracing manzanita on the tile wall shower. Sliding doors, smooth new floors. Old house, a big hall now, big as a stable, to bang the mead stein on the table. Robin got a room to write a poem, and no more nights walking to the John. Carol finally coming home, peeking at her many rooms. Oak and pine trees looking on. Old Kit Dizzy house now has another wing. So we'll pour a glass and sing. This has been fun as heaven, summer of 97. A communal activity that you can just feel all the joy that comes from working together. And all of it, he's bringing in everything around the soil, the weeds, the friends, the trees. I got a couple more here. I want to read a couple of mine that are written about communal soul. This is called A Black Bear Near the Cemetery. On the way to work, a mature, myopic black bear blocked my road. When my brakes squealed, he sniffed for directions, galloped through the jewel weed, and disappeared beyond the graveyard. Year by year, more bears returned to Pierce County, hide between the bluffs, and feed on bitter cherries and blackcaps. Once I dreamed a herd of bears surrounded me, were eyeing me, and spoke to one another in English. Last winter, I dreamed a huge bear joined our group of singers, wrapped his arms around our shoulders, and wept. When I gather with my friends tomorrow, I'll try to sing for the dead ones in my family, in my scratchy baritone voice. And here's a poem I wrote about 1988 about a men's conference. And this is called In the Silent Hour. In the silent hour, 30 white men wade in the shallow water. A chill splashes up over our heavy legs, shrinks our scrotums, and laps our thickening waists. In deeper, an occasional soul drops fully into his private pool of dark, eerie isolation. Then he emerges rolling with the great exalting gasps of his whale nature. Bears recognize such sounds and for a moment contemplate the art of herd animals. Kingfishers comprehend the quick dips and stuttering hoots of a hunter overcome by cold water. Across the bottom sand, where snails dance in a slow show of persistence, our watery footprints vanish as we celebrate our herd, aloneness, and the spectacle of silent joy. In the mid-90s, at one of the conferences, we were having a Sufi singing night. We were singing sacred chants, reciting short sacred poems, and some of the men were dancing their poems. John Witherspoon was an Anishinaabe Ojibwe man sent by his elders to check us out. About the fourth evening of the conference, we were in a hall singing while he was out looking at the stars. Suddenly, This indigenous man rushed in, flailing his arms, flabbergasted, as he said in a loud, excited voice, "The spirit women from all around the world, dressed in their traditional dresses, are in the sky coming to look at us." Somehow or other, we touched, through our communal realm, we touched beyond the physical plane. And those things sometimes happen when we experience ritual, communal soul. I just want to end here with the last part of my poem, "Men Don't Dance in America." My gramps danced when he trapped a raccoon. My pops jigs for crappies. When he's fishing on ice, he's dancing through crystals. He's moving with the joy of his gender. I drift outdoors just after midnight and swing like a hunter through the shadows. I dream dance in the snow, slide in the fogs, pirouette through cornfields and birch groves. Yet we never dance together. White men don't dance in America. Dancing is living. It's flying like raptors. It's born on the wind of its making. Put 10 men together, dancing with pride, not meekly, not floppy, but surging with joy. The trees will shake with concurrence. Put 500 together, proud on their feet, proud of their lives and their families. Mountains will march to watch that grand feat. The clouds will part for the sunshine. Nothing on earth can beat like the drum that thunders the hearts of strong men. And nothing will express the force of creation like dancing men in America. Dancing is joy, and it's joy, and it's joy. The earth won't deprive men of joy. But white men don't dance in America. Men don't dance in America. Men will dance in America. And that's my presentation, guys. Thank you.
Wow. Tim, thank you, man. There was so much coming in for me. I found my mind kind of moving in lots of different ways. You know, such a foundational consideration, isn't it, at many levels? Walton, do we turn it over to you?
Sure. This is a little bit longer poem, and it's also from that Loving the Community and Work. This is a Kenneth Rexroth poem.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called For Eli Jacobson, December 1952. But reading this, it could have been written last week and could be referring to the community of men that that we've all built over the decades here. There are few of us now. Soon there will be none. We were comrades together. We believed we would see with our own eyes the new world where man was no longer wolf to man, but men and women were all brothers and lovers together. We will not see it. We will not see it, none of us. It is farther off than we thought. In our young days, we believed that as we grew old and fell out of rank, new recruits, young and with the wisdom of youth, would take our places, and they surely would grow old in the golden age. They have not come. They will not come. There are not many of us left. Once we marched in closed ranks. Today, each of us fights off the enemy, a lonely, isolated guerrilla. All this has happened before, many times. It does not matter. We were comrades together. Life was good for us. It is good to be brave. Nothing is better. Food tastes better. Wine is more brilliant. Girls are more beautiful. The sky is bluer for the brave. For the brave and happy comrades, and for the lonely, retreating warriors. You had a good life. Even all its sorrows and defeats, disillusionments were good, met with courage and a gay heart. You are gone, and we are that much more alone. We are one fewer. Soon we shall be none. We know now we have failed for a long time, and we do not care. We few will remember as long as we can. Our children may remember. Someday the world will remember. Then they will say, they lived in the days of the good comrades. It must have been wonderful to have been alive then, though it is very beautiful now. We will be remembered, all of us, always, by all men. In the good days, now so far away. If the good days never come, we will not know. We will not care. Our lives were the best. We were the happiest men alive in our day.